You might not have heard about the LTVZ-38 unless you're a turbo nerd like me. However, if you haven't, fret not, as I shall introduce it to you in this video. So gather around this awfully convenient and whiteboard and let me tell you about its story. While you probably haven't heard the name LTVZ-38 before, you will have likely heard of the Panzer 38T, an early war light tank that served in a supplemental role alongside the Panzer I and II light tanks, but more on that later on in the video. As all good stories start, we shall start at the beginning. While I would normally love to come in and mispronounce a bunch of Czech words, we will at least get one correct pronunciation of this tank's full name. And guess what? I have the perfect thing for that. A native speaker. He informs me that it is called this.
Českomoravská kolbendaněk, zkráceně ČKD, LT vzor 38.
It would not be an unreasonable finding to say that the geopolitical situation concerning Czechoslovakia was generally considered to be suboptimal, and the unreliable, untested and disliked LTVZ-35 light tank left a lot to be desired and was deemed in need of a replacement at this time. The army believed that the lack of testing for the prior LTVZ-35 model tank was the cause of its shortcomings and proceeded with that in mind. Multiple tanks were considered for the role, with CKD pitching a design wildly stemming from the bones of the previous LTVZ-35. The LT-35 was really a conventional interwar tank, with riveted construction for the hull and turret of the tank. The front of the hull had armour up to 25mm thick, the sides and rear had 15mm, and the roof had 10mm thick. The turret featured the same armour profile in terms of thickness as well. It had a footprint of about 10 meters squared with a length of 4.5 meters and a width of just over 2 meters. Since I've been doing suspension recently, we might as well do a deep dive into this one suspension as well. The LT-38 featured 4 large rubber-rimmed metal road wheels. Say that 10 times fast. The rubber being used to absorb a small amount of shock and made the overall ride quality better. Additionally, the softer interface meant that it reduced the metal-to-metal contact with the tracks, reducing the wear and tear on the part, with a byproduct of reducing the noise of the tank. These road wheels shared a leaf spring between 2 of the road wheels in a very typical interwar suspension style, but a much better arrangement than the previous LT-35. The German crews of the LT-38 generally praised the running gear of the tank, with comments saying the drive components of the tank were perfectly in tune with each other. Proof of this is by the tank's generally stellar reliability, leading to their continued use far into the war. The LT-38 used a Praga EPA 6-cylinder inline water-cooled petrol engine capable of outputting 110 kilowatts or 148 horsepower. This was paired with a Praga Wilson type CV transmission with 5 forward gears and 1 reverse gear. This setup managed to propel the tank up to a top speed of 42 kilometers an hour and got it a range of 160 kilometers an hour. However, for my American audience, that's 96,735 Browning M2 machine guns long. Finally, for its armament, it was mounted with the Skoda A7, or also known as the 37cm UVVZ-38, a 37mm tank gun that was designed by Skoda directly for the 38T. This gun was roughly equivalent in performance to the American 37mm M3 cannon firing AP. The Skoda A7 was tested at 500 meters, firing APC-BC with a contact angle of 30 degrees to penetrate 33mm of armor. However, there are a few more variables at play in armor penetration statistics, but it does give you a broad idea of what the gun was capable of. Alongside the cannon, it could mount 2 7.92 ZB-54 machine guns, which were the basis for the Beza machine gun. Now gather round, as I need to give you a little bit of context around the situation Czechoslovakia was in at this time. Germany had started a low-intensity, undeclared war on Czechoslovakia, which prompted the United Kingdom and France to formally request the ceding of the Sudetenland. In September 1938, the German Reich held a meeting in Munich involving the major European powers, which involved Germany, the United Kingdom, France, and Italy. The result of this was the Munich Agreement, which facilitated the German annexation of a Czechoslovak region called the Sudetenland, which held very many German people. Czechoslovakia was not invited to this treaty, despite having many diplomats in the area. Due to this, many Czechs and Slovaks call it the Munich Betrayal to this day. If the Czechoslovaks tried to defend themselves against German aggression, it wouldn't have gone well, as in a war against Germany, they would have had no allies and would have inevitably lost. To add salt to the wound, they would have faced massive destruction from the likes of German bombing raids, which would have destroyed huge historical areas and crippled their industrial capacity. This treaty massively reduced the chances of the Czechoslovak armed forces to fight off a German invasion, as the Sudetenland was a very easily defendable, fortified, mountainous area. And as it turns out, the inevitable German invasion of Czechoslovakia came in March 1939, with German troops occupying the remaining Czech lands, creating the Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia, with Slovakia declaring independence as a nominally independent German puppet state. So that's what you need to know about Czechoslovakia in this time period. Back to the video. Due to the annexation of Czechoslovakia, the Germans inherited a large amount of Czech equipment, including the LTVZ-38, which the Germans renamed to the Panzer 38T, with the T standing for the German word for Czechoslovakia, and not how I say it, like in a bunch of places that refer to it as ton, like Panzer 38 ton. That is just incorrect, and do your research. But anyway, back to the topic at hand, the aforementioned tank stockpile. After trials were conducted, where it performed above expectations, Germany ordered the tank into further production. First introduced under the name LTM-38, and then later changed to the Panzerkampfwagen 38T. When in service, it outperformed the likes of the Panzer I and II, which were the Panzerwaffe's main tanks during the onset of the war. They were pressed into service in two panzer divisions, the 7th and the 8th, with the 7th being under the command of the general that would soon claim fame in the following years of the war, Rommel. They primarily saw action in the invasion of France and the invasion of Poland, where they in the field performed up to their high expectations. It was in service long enough to see the German invasion of the Soviet Union, where it struggled greatly with its armament and was phased out. The Romanians did keep their models in service though, and were issued some in 1943, but by then its obsolescence wasn't something you could ignore anymore. The 38T was then replaced by heavier tanks such as the Panzer III, IV and Stug III, as the 38T was then pushed into a reconnaissance role. Some of these recon tanks were then fitted with the turret from the Sonderkraft Fahrzeug 222, swapping the 37mm cannon of the 38T with the 2cm KWK-30 autocannon from the Panzer II, which made the tank better equipped for the foes that it might see in this new role. The only issue that was really faced with the 38T was the lack of real gun performance, as it was pitted to fight tanks such as the likes of the French B-2, the Soviet T-34 and the KV-1, where it struggled greatly. So a plan was devised to use the adequate chassis of the 38T to base the next generation of tank destroyers on. The first of these was the Marder III, which ditched the turret of the 38T for a fixed superstructure that was bolted onto the top of the tank and fitted with a Russian field gun, which was captured in great quantities. This gun being the 76.2mm divisional gun M1936, which was converted into the 7.62cm FK36R. This conversion gave the pre-existing Panzer 38T chassis a bit more life. Later on, there were several changes made to the Marder III, mainly the change in gun to the 7.5cm PAK-40, a dedicated anti-tank gun, and a rearrangement of the interior of the vehicle. These changes moved the engine to the front of the tank and moved the fighting compartment to the rear of the tank, which allowed the fighting compartment to be mounted lower, giving the crew more protection. The final change was the enclosure of the back of the fighting compartment, which the previous Marders never featured. Towards the end of the war in 1944, it was noted that the pre-existing tank destroyers of the German armoured forces were basically all based on obsolete tanks, which, while performing greater than expected, were mostly all very tall vehicles or open-topped, like the Marders. So when Stug 3 production went offline during a bombing raid on Berlin, they had to find a new source of dedicated tank destroyers. This new design was based on the Panzer 38T, but on a modified chassis which was widened and lengthened with modified running gear. But that's really where the similarities ended, as basically everything else has changed to a degree. The main benefit of this approach was the fact that the pre-existing 38T factories could be retooled minimally to produce this model. The main advantages of the Jagdpanzer 38T was its small silhouette and its thick sloped armour, which made it a formidable foe as it was quite hard to spot and could easily reject enemy rounds. This new tank destroyer performed so well that production of the Stug 3 was halted and diverted to this. Thanks for watching this video and making it to the end, but don't go anywhere just yet, as I've got to give a huge thanks to the Czech guy whose name is on screen now, because I have no hope in hell in getting that pronunciation right. He was pivotal for this video, not just including the Academy Award for voice acting we heard in the first part of the video, but also he played a huge part in general, checking over my script and other small facts that he was able to help me with due to his natural knowledge of the subject, as well, he's Czech. So make sure you leave a comment saying thanks to him for his work. And just a small channel update to close out. The suspension and the Helldivers video have done surprisingly well in the lull of views I had for a while there. And hi to all the new people who have subscribed recently. Hope you enjoy your stay. Also, fun fact, I've got a Discord server that I'm relatively active in. So if you want to join it, the link will be at the top of the description, and come say hi. But anyways, thank you for making it this far and being an amazing audience to my unqualified ramblings. Make sure you leave a like on this video to tell me that you enjoyed it, and subscribe for more content. Bye!